theory. So, time is running and that clock is freaking me out because it's totally wrong. So, Hertzberg's motivation theory, that's just another theory. And the reason I mention it is that it has had super much influence, but it hasn't really been proved yet. So we haven't the data that says this is the way it works, but it goes into many theories and it goes into many arguments. So that's why you have to know that there are these belief about hygiene factors, that there are a number of things in an organization that just has to be there, but it doesn't help to increase the amount of the hygiene factors. So hygiene factors are just a necessary thing that has to be in place. So another theory, and basically this chapter is just a lot of different theories about motivation. McKellen's need for achievement, affiliation, and power. There are some that are driven by power. And one of the reasons I bring this out is that there are also this need for affiliation. And if you're promoted as a leader, and suddenly you have to act with a group that perhaps you've been working with, then it's difficult to have this need for affiliation. Because the moment you become a leader, you step outside the group. And a number of leadership issues that we see many places, in particular in social work, is that the manager, the leader, wants to be affiliated with the group and doesn't distance himself enough from the group. And that means it's really difficult to make decisions because are you a leader, or are we buddy-buddy, or what's the relationship here? So just know that when you become leaders, then you have a different role. And the need for affiliation can be a problem if that's what drives you in your work, in particular for the group that you work with. So here we have equity theory. It's also a different type of theory, but it goes very well with the idea of justice. And for those of you in the Nordic countries, we work a lot with social capital. Social capital is basically trust, justice, and collaboration. And these two, trust and justice, if we have that in a group, then suddenly you have a group that really wants to function with each other, and you have high output and performance. And equity theory revolves about the same idea, that fairness or perceived fairness is what drives you. So if there's a lack of fairness or lack of equity, then you react to this. So equity is basically an issue about the input and output for me. How much do I give and how much do I get compared to my fellow colleague? I mean, he doesn't give a lot of input, he gets a lot of output. That's not good, that's not fair. So that affects my motivation. So basically you have these different conditions that you have equity. Myself and my referent, the one I'm comparing myself to, we're equal, so no worries. But underpayment, here we just have a simple output as payment, but it could also be just that the outcomes he wants or the outcomes we have are different. It's not just payment, it's also promotion, it's relations, it's all the outcomes. But I give a lot of outcomes and my ratio is lower, so I perceive an inequity, and that prompts a reaction. Because what we know from justice theory and equity theory is that it's a balance, and it's a balance that as soon as this balance begins to tip, you're going to influence it. If you feel underappreciated or under equity, you're going to do something to change that balance. And you can reduce your outcomes or your perception of the outcomes. You can reduce your perception of the referent, or you can reduce your inputs. So if I perceive I'm not being rewarded enough for what I do, then I just lowered my effort. Of course, you have the overpayment equity. That's a good situation, but there you are in a relation to your fellows where you see they're not getting the same as me. Is that fair? Goal setting theory. The theory here is that if you have to get people to perform, then you have to have clear goals. Those people that work, they need to know what they're going to do. So motivating goals are goals that are specific. We're not just getting better in some area. We're not just doing something else. No, we're trying to set a specific goal. It's an ambitious goal. It's difficult, but it's achievable. So it's not we're going to be world class and the best in the world, and right now we're just sort of scraping the bottom. It's a completely impossible to reach that goal. So it has to be within reach, and that's also always a relative. That is a negotiation between the parties. And it has to be accepted. It has to be that the workers, the people, the employees, they think, well, that's a good goal. That's fair. So I'm going to work towards that. I'm going to work towards becoming better in some area or performing differently in one area. And feedback is important here. We can say that when we're working towards that goal, we're in the right direction, or we can point that we're not in the right direction. And that is translated into these SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. It's not just, at some point in time in the future, we are going to be exceedingly good at our operations. No, in 6 months, we're going to change our operational efficiency by X%. Concretely, we're going to change this and that and this. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. It's easy to control by these goals, but often when we're in a situation where we make choices, we're not always very specific. So we just give relative goals. And how do we follow up on relative goals? We can't. It's always going to be like elastic bands. Which way are we going? And are we actually doing right now? Or is it the right thing we're doing? So try to be specific. Try, when you specify a goal, ask people, okay, if you're going to measure this, what question would you ask? How would you measure if you're on the right track? Then suddenly it becomes very concrete, very relevant, very close to your day-to-day business. When we do change, I do change, I always ask people in the groups that propose changes, are we going to be better at talking to each other during surgery? Okay, how are we going to measure that? Okay, we're going to talk about the words we use, and we're going to measure that within 2 weeks. How often do you feel insulted by a colleague? So we make a simple, very concrete measurement. We're going to measure that again in 4 weeks. Then we can see if we're on the right track. But it has to be measurable. It has to be very concrete. Then there are a number of learning theories. Learning theories are theories that says we're going to make a sort of a permanent change in people. Some of what Elise and Johnny talked about were learning theories, that we influence people, we teach them that if they behave in a specific way, then over time they're going to change. And they escalate, like the example with people that were doing plagiarism. As soon as we identify the problem, we step in, we make a small adjustment, we try to influence that and enforce that behavior. When dealing with learning theories, we talk about what's called operant conditioning. Sounds nice, but basically we focus on behavior. And behavior is the actual way we act in our day-to-day work. It is how I approach something. It is how I behave as a person in that particular situation. We're not very used to, in a Nordic country, in a Nordic context, to talk about our actual behavior. It's sort of up to ourselves to behave the way we want. It's just within boundaries. Other cultures are very specific that you should behave in a specific way in a specific situation. But here we can use positive reinforcement. That might be payment, praises, promotion, pat on the shoulder. Interestingly, there's also negative reinforcement, but it's not thought of as punishment. It's just a way to remove these undesired outcomes. So it might be criticism, it might be pay cuts, it might be suspension is very close to being punishment, but it is a way of getting people to change the output. We also have what's called extinction. And extinction is not as bad as it seems, but we're simply removing the condition where the behavior exists. If we have people that always meet at the door and start talking and blah, blah, blah in the manager's office, they spend half an hour every morning. So what we could do is that we could have those that always talk and meet at the same time, we would ask them to meet at different times. So they don't have that particular situation where they meet and start talking. So we're not influencing them directly. We're trying to remove the condition where the undesired behavior occurs. And of course, in the end, we have punishment. That is the raised finger, and simply try to stop this dysfunctional behavior. And it's almost something close to the examples they use in the book, or something close to illegal behavior that perhaps need jail time, or something really bad. Our time is flying again. Then social learning theory. Yeah. A Twitter thing.
So it's mainly relating back to the whole presentation you had before from Fire and Shield. But it states that somebody recently seen a larger company with around 8,000 employees just simply sending out an email, will there be mass reductions over the next 4 months and how many in each department? But it seemed like in those 4 months production just stopped. So the question is, why would an organization do it like this? If you have an answer to that.
The organization sent out a mail that, could you just repeat them?
Yeah, so the organization just sent out a mail to all the employees saying that they would have mass reductions over the next 4 months. And how many that would be fired in each department.
That's a way to do it. It's a very direct way. I probably wouldn't do it the same way. Usually you would have negotiations between labor parties and labor unions and have this trickle down. Unless it's a public traded company. In a public traded company, then the information has to go to the stock exchange the same time as it has to go to the employees. And there you cannot give the information out before it's basically too late. So you don't have the luxury of preparing people for a major change. And an 8,000 people company, that might be the reason. So management has probably been preparing this process for a long time. And the easiest way to reach everyone at the same time is a simple email. It's not a very nice thing. When they've done firings in some of the bigger companies, people have been asked to be in their office at a particular time, and then they would walk around, knock on the doors, and fire people, and you could just sit there, I'm one being picked, I'm being the one being fired. It's not nice. It's simply a way of controlling information and making sure that the market and the employees get information at the same time. If the market gets information later than employees, then they have a huge incentive to manipulate the stock or just buy or sell whatever they have.
Yes, I think that was it. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, social learning theory. So here we have a different situation where there's some sort of social context. Someone is being next to someone and learning. And the major issue here is that you have to be able to observe. You have to be able to observe what's going on. Rasmus is actually researching this type of learning where we try to create networks that share knowledge. And it requires people to be in close proximity. So for specialist work, where you work alone, this type of social learning theory doesn't really work because you have no one to observe. There's no place where you can go and observe the praxis. So it's a different type. Of course, you have self-reinforcement. If you're an individual and you're a consultant or you work in a specialist field, then this type of learning theory and this type of motivational behavior is really important. Give yourself a pat on the back. Yeah, I did something good today. No one else saw it, but I did. It's what's expected in some jobs that you are self-motivating. And lastly, self-efficacy. That's basically a person's belief about his or her abilities. Do I think I'm good at this? Can I manage? And if you have high self-efficacy, then you can basically throw a person into any situation and they will manage. They'll float and they'll solve the problem. They might not be the best at it, but they're not going to crack down and then you're going to take one step back and say, well, I can't handle this, because they have super high self-efficacy. So, and lastly, we have the job characteristic model. And what's interesting about this is that here you have the tools that you as managers can influence. Do you have a job for your employees that has skill variety or task identity? How does your employees relate to the task? We can change the contents of a job. We can put different skills. We can put different tasks in it. So we have the influence to adjust this. Also the amount of autonomy. Every time something happens, do I have to go to the manager to ask? Or do I give someone authority to make decisions? Also feedback. A lot of what Johnny and Elise talked about was based on feedback. You always have to give feedback to people. It's about relations. So that theory is not a motivational theory per se, but it's a leadership theory that builds on motivation and feedback and motivation. And Well, changing these job characteristics, these we can model. We can change the psychological states, and we can have this high-low motivation. So there's a mix, there's an alignment here between the job characteristics and the people that you put in the job. So if you design a job that has super low skill variety and you hire someone who is super competent and can do a lot of stuff, then you don't have alignment between skill variety, task identity, and what is experienced as meaningful work. And then, of course, you have low motivation. Should I do this? No, boring. Don't want to do that. I'm not going to go into this video, but it's a different video that shows how autonomy, mastery, and purpose is a driving motivator and a driving factor for people in complex and knowledge work. It's a 10-minute video. I think you should see it. It's a really nice description that also takes something about bonus and how bonus does not work in knowledge work. So it's an interesting little video. So now we're going to people practice, and then you have to do something.
Yeah, just to avoid continuous talking and slide shifting, I wanted to ask you about the Whoopty.com case. Anyone remember? Gave you a small task. Web page that went from just selling like large manufacturers, refrigerators, to basically also being a distribution channel for other companies that also sell electronic goods. What has happened in terms of, or using the terminology from a business model canvas? Yep.
They they have created a new value proposition, which is basically distributing goods for other companies.
Mm-hmm. So why is it a different value proposition? Or do I as a customer get a different?
So I guess it's not a different value proposition, but they can sort of get rid of some of the key resources they had from their previous company, so now they're not in charge of the sort of the storage of the goods and all these things, manufacturing.
But they still have that function
within the field that they know. But also, to me, it seems like they're just trying to copy Amazon in the way that they work.
Exactly.
They have realized that Amazon is doing good. They'll probably do the same.
Yeah. So what I would say they've done is probably taken some of their competitors and turned them into a key partner. Because some of those that are selling at the site also have their own web page for selling consumer electronics. Anyways.
If you were to use your value proposition, then you could say that before they have their own products, they had channels and they had customers. Now they offer those channels to what were once their competitors, which are now key partners. So they have a value proposition in offering challenge to their partners, and they just charge a fee for allowing them to use their channels.
Okay, moving into the last section of today, leadership. We've talked about the 4 functions of leadership, and sometimes we use the words management and leadership, and they can be interchanged quite frequently, so if you're confused, don't worry, other people are also. But today we're going to talk a lot about the relational part, how to motivate people, how to coordinate tasks. But I would like to start with a question that relates to this. So just take 1 minute and discuss with your side partner. What do you see as the difference between management and leadership? Yeah, 1 minute. Okay. Anyone cares to join in? We can just start with defining leadership or management if you want to do that, or you can also just highlight the differences. Yeah, can we get the mic over there?
We just talked about leadership and management. The difference is that managers, they tell you what to do, and then they leave and they do their own thing. And the leaders, they stay with you through the execution process. So leadership is more like, driving the change. Management is like just, on the top, you're just looking at it, how things are going, and just trying to tweak it. But leadership is more involved than management. This is what we have discussed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice.
I think also the differences between the two is leadership is a lot about getting people involved and showing them the way, getting them motivated, and paving the path towards the future. Where management tends to be more controlling, have you reached these goals? Have you? So looking, maybe the retrospective of, are we on the right track? So a bit more controlling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree so far. Yeah, more? Down here in the front.
So if you just go back to the slide right before, see that leading is part of the management. Leading is both guiding and motivating people, but management is also controlling, planning, and organizing. So it's not just like, it's a part of being a manager, but it's not the entire story. You need to have other aspects as well when you manage.
Yeah. And as I said, there's not a clear distinction, but often we go, as you said, the management part, which is more bureaucratic, related to control and running systems, and leadership is more related to getting people to function. And I think Elise and Johnny said it very nice. What was it they said? This is a matter of getting the best out of people, but also making sure that you take care of other people's money. So there's something about controlling, being responsible for the money in the company, and also being responsible for the people. But it relates very nicely to the STAR model, because you can see there definitely something related to the people practices, which I see is highly related to leadership. And then you have also something about structures, processes, and then you come to reward systems, which some of these things fall in between, like being a bureaucrat, but also taking care of the people within the company. So when you work with this in your cases, then you have a very nice framework in the STAR model to consider what should be the areas that management or leadership should touch upon. Yeah. Good. There's a very nice section in the book about the power related to being a manager or managerial power. Because, of course, you're in a position when you become a manager, a project manager, or call it a real manager, to make decisions and influence people. And I've brought the definitions along here because I really like them. Because there's the legitimate power, like the hierarchical, that actually comes with the position. So you actually are able to make some decisions that just being assigned as a manager. And then there's rewards power, as you also see in the STAR model, and as Kasper touched about. I mean, what do you actually want to promote as a positive reinforcement that actually make people do something? It can be responsibility, it can be attention, it can be verbal praise, depending on the person that you're meeting, just like fire, or as Elise and Johnny also talked about. But there's also the coercive power that can have the negative effect, but to avoid actions that you don't want repeated. That's something you as a manager can also use. And the expert power, and especially for you as engineers, you're probably going to be in that position because you're going to have a lot of specialized knowledge about some kind of technical field. So you can also use that when you are a manager, and sometimes it actually gives you a great position to be in a relationship, or at least a work relationship with your co-workers or your subordinates, because sometimes I say you will know the difference between when something is real and when something is just bullshit, because you have the insight, you have some idea about what's actually right or wrong. But you also have the more soft referent power, and this is highly related to the shield part, as Elise and Johnny talked about, saying, well, what is actually your influence, maybe not directly, but because people like you or want to follow you or find you attractive in some way, or maybe just respect you as a manager, because as Kasper said, it's not just about being likable, it's even more probably about being respectable. Because it's not, you can easily be likable, but it's very difficult sometimes to be respectable. And these distinctions of power you can also bring in to your case analysis, because if you have a case where you're going to work with management, then you can start to analyze, well, what is the kind of power that will actually maybe be suited for this kind of company or this type of employees, or how should we discuss it with the managers that are actually a part of the company, because you can overemphasize something. A theory that is, you say, is probably very known, and is somewhat, I would say, simplified, but it gives you an idea about what someone has thought about would influence you as a manager, because it basically divides people into two categories. There's the theory Y and theory X. X basically means that when people are lazy, they are not automatically or intrinsically motivated to do their best, need to be controlled, need to be followed up. And you can somehow relate this to a management perspective on having a responsibility for other people. You need to control them, you need to follow up. There's the other part of theory Y that basically says that, well, people basically come to work to do their best. So we believe in, we basically believe that people don't need to be controlled, but if we make sure that they have the right resources and the right opportunities, then they will do their very, very best. And I have a small task for you now to discuss, because you're going to use this theory. 1 minute, and then I would like an answer and an explanation to why you would categorize either one of these. We're going to also take care of DHA later, but just start with these two guys and say, well, why do you think that they would be characterized as having a perspective of X or Y on the employees? Okay, 1 minute. Okay. Anyone wants to provide an answer and an explanation? You can start with either one. Yeah?
Hello? Okay. Well, for the North Korean part, it would be easy that that theory X would apply to him, since he controls people very harshly. But I was just thinking about the him trying to be a communist, for example. Where if you have a totally communist way of a totally communist society, you would have equal division of pay and all these kinds of stuff. So that would kind of well, you would have to apply the theory Y to that. Because if people were just lazy, they would just pick the easiest job, because then I will get the same pay as the one working hard. So I was just thinking that you could actually start a debate on that kind of stuff.
So if you have a theoretical perspective on North Korean politics,
Yeah.
you would say it looks like theory Y because everybody's equal and we share the wealth, but in practice,
Yeah, it's probably X.
It looks
because,
different.
Yeah, it's very controlling. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And someone on Gandhi? Thank you. Yeah. Anyone? I forgot to ask if everyone knows who Gandhi is. Yeah? What about him? Yeah.
Where?
Red stripes.
Perhaps you should sit closer next time.
So Mahatma Gandhi was he was a leader. He brought the independence movement in India. So he definitely is why, and he was more about empowering people. And there were two wars of independence in India. One was in 1857. One started in 1919 or something. And we got independence in 1947. So this was a very long thing. Because of the First World War, it stopped for some reason, and then Second World War, then it was finally done. In 1857, it was just the kings fighting, so people were not interested.
No.
But when Mahatma Gandhi came and he involved people, and he told them that, okay, this is how the world is going to look like if we get independent from the British rule.
Yeah.
Then actually, it was like a fire spread like through the whole country, and it made an effect.
Yeah.
Really, and because even though 1857 was like really fought well by the kings and their armies, they just lost because the local people were not involved.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely a why.
Okay. So he had the idea of maybe, let's say, moving a society from one that's characterized by theory X into something that's theory Y, and people were actually they found that enough to go to war, so actually also revolve. Yeah. Great. I would like to highlight DHL in this case, because what's interesting about them is that there you can see both sides. Because what they have is this Lean Six Sigma manufacturing system with standards being applied, basically telling you how to do something. And if you don't do it this way, then you probably shouldn't work here. Whereas at the same time, you have them working with celebrating by firing off confetti bombs and trying to work with the intrinsic motivation. So you can't say it's either black or white in the cases, but you have different, we can call them handles as they didn't find shit, but you can find different parts of theory X and Y when you look at your cases. It's not as black and white as Kim Jong-un and Mahatma Gandhi. No. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Then we move into some more directly leadership theory. And you could probably characterize, as they did, Elise and Johnny, fire and shield in this category also, because it relates to how you as a manager act and what the outcome of your actions are. And I've brought one that comes from the book and another one that's just very modern, but transformational leadership. And there's a very nice case in the book about a lady that, I can't remember the company that she was the CEO for, but how she was charismatic and was crazy intellectually stimulate her subordinates to take action and drive a change. And what they say is that subordinates of transformational managers, they're aware of the importance of their job and the relevance, but they also take care of their own personal needs for growth and development. And they work for the good of the organization, not just their own. So we work towards one desired goal, all of us. That's transformational leadership. Another one, that's not, I know this is not mentioned in the book, but it's just frequently used, is management by objectives. That's where employees are involved in setting objectives and goals to reach by, they're involved in that by their manager. So the manager has a role in trying to, together with the employee, to set goals for like a future set of actions. And then employees are basically motivated to pursue these goals and follow these steps of actions. And the reasons why I highlight these two is because they both have this perspective, as far as SHIELD does, that we as managers can do something and it has an outcome. Because another perspective that's also mentioned in the book is what you could characterize as contingency theories. And what they basically state is that it doesn't just depend on what you do as a manager. The outcome of your actions as a manager happens in interplay between the context, so the organization, and how you act as a manager. So how you could translate that into a more simple equation is that basically saying that you cannot take, for example, transformational leadership or fire and shield into any organization and you will just have gold streaming out the door. There's a context you need to consider. It's just like sometimes when we talk about how we try to export democracy from the Western countries. Maybe it just doesn't always work because there's a different culture, a different context we put it into. Because what's interesting is that, and this is a new story that I brought along, is that in 2014 there were approximately 1,800 cases of work-related stress. In 2017 there were 2,500. This is just for one insurance company. And what they say, professors and researchers and insurance companies say is that, well, we like our work, but there's something about this control and evaluation perspective we've taken into account. And there's this increased idea about increased efficiency that we need to create more and more. And what we often talk about is that management has a role in this. Because what if we actually go to work to become sick? And some people criticize that, and you can see that in all of these three management theories that we work with, or leadership theories, is that they are highly individual. We say, well, it's the manager and the employee. And of course, what was nice about Fire Shield is that they talked about the team also. But how do we get to work as a team? Because if you have individual goal setting with each employee, how does that relate into you working as a team towards a shared goal? Yeah. So what I would like for you to take with you, because we don't have time to discuss this, is maybe just a consideration, because this is a question that I found interesting to thought about. Are we just a group of people that come into the same door and act together and basically create something that we call an organization when we are together in the room? Or are we just individuals that go into a company and do something independent of each other? Because this relates to how you will act as managers. And this is the final task. Because I would like to have done this task with you, but sorry, we're out of time. Because you can consider when you're a startup or a pharmaceutical company or a nursing situation, what kind of leadership could you consider to apply, or how could leadership be characterized in these situations? Because when you work with your case presentation or your case analysis, then if you're a leader of a startup or a leader in Novo Nordisk, these are two very different ways of working. Because in a startup, everybody does the same. In Novo Nordisk, this is a machine that runs. You have a responsibility that you are assigned to. And on that note, thank you for listening. I hope you have enjoyed it. And good luck with your case analysis. Yay!